I'm going to show how to put a dynamic playlist into a presentation. I'll start BrightAuthor. I'm running here version 4.1, but it almost doesn't matter which version BrightAuthor you use because in this respect most recent versions are the same. A presentation, as you know, can be very simple or can be more complex with zones. A dynamic playlist is a playlist that does not belong to the presentation, but instead is referenced from inside the presentation. Dynamic playlists can be created in two locations. You can either create a dynamic playlist here inside BrightAuthor and upload it. It can then be managed in BrightAuthor and simply uploaded again. So I might create a new dynamic playlist with a few items, do a save as. I've got a folder here where I save this sort of thing, and I'll just call this Ray's playlist. And you see that I now have a playlist that exists outside of any project I've designed. Choosing upload will push a copy of this playlist up to the servers. That's done. In a project, if I want to refer to a dynamic playlist, and I should point out that there's no limit to the number of these I create. In fact, you notice when I went to save here, there are several others that are saved locally, and if I browse my account, you'll see that in the account I have already uploaded a handful, including this that I just uploaded now. So presently in my account I have 4 dynamic playlists. If you want to see the contents of a playlist that someone else might have modified, start a browser and log in to your BrightSign Network account, which I will do right now. And under the Create tab here, you will see the exact same dynamic playlists that have been created, including the one here that I just uploaded. If I choose Edit, you'll see the dynamic playlist is shown here, along with a library, my online library of contents, and I can manage the dynamic playlist online and hit Save. This is tremendously valuable to be able, with nothing more than a browser, to manage the contents of your dynamic playlists. To include a dynamic playlist in a project, you first need to make the project aware that the dynamic playlist exists. Under Presentation Properties, you choose Data Feeds. Add a feed. Here you're presented with your dynamic playlists, including the one that I just now created. Give it a name for use in this project. This doesn't affect the name it has online. Make sure it's marked as a media RSS feed. And by the way, this is how you would add media RSS feeds, with a URL to the feed. But a dynamic playlist is really nothing more than a media RSS feed. And say OK. The dynamic playlist is now linked to this project and can be used on a timeline. It's under Other. Most people look at their lists, their content this way. It's a media RSS feed. You bring that here, and it will list all that you have previously defined and give you the opportunity to define others. The contents of that dynamic playlist will now play in this moment in the playlist. This playlist, with whatever I put in it, will run at this moment. And of course, I can put let's browse to where I have some video. I can put other items around it. These are not part of the dynamic playlist and will run as well. So in this moment, everything in that playlist will run, and then here other items can be placed. Or you can simply leave it as the dynamic playlist and nothing else. Publishing is normal. One last thing about dynamic playlists that I'd like to show you. There's a feature here that you don't get otherwise. It's only available inside a dynamic playlist. I can choose an item and set when that item is valid. For example, I can say this item is only valid this coming Saturday and Sunday. So from Saturday to Sunday, this item will run. But until Saturday, it will not run. And after Sunday, it will not run. This little pause icon will show you that this is a future event. So were I to use this dynamic playlist right now, this item will play because it's current in the sense that it has no validity assigned. This item, however, has validity enabled, and the validity is out in the future, the 29th and 30th. So the concept of asset validity is exposed here in a dynamic playlist. One last, I should save this and quit. One last feature that's very, very important as regards dynamic playlists. Because they're not part of a normal presentation, BrightAuthor cannot keep track of the assets here. BrightAuthor only knows that this dynamic playlist will play here, but the contents of this dynamic playlist are not part of the project. The player will go download those assets itself directly from the service. These assets are not included in the project. That's important because you might end up in a case where you overfill your memory card. And that, because again, BrightAuthor doesn't know how large this project is. And so we give you here under Edit Preferences, I got to this screen by choosing Edit Preferences, a storage management tool, which generally should be on when you start using dynamic playlists, where you can set percent limits of the available storage space that published data, that is assets that are part of the project, and dynamic data, that is assets that come from dynamic playlists and media RSS feeds, are constrained to no more than, in this case, 45% of available storage. Make sure that this adds up to 100, and the player will now receive instructions as part of the publish to manage the various asset pools within these constraints. If you do not check this, you can end up in a case where your card fills and the player stops because it does not properly manage assets in the dynamic playlist pool, and it's particularly the dynamic content pool that will get you in trouble. So if you're going to use dynamic playlists, turn this on and make some settings here that are reasonable for you. I hope that's helpful. Please let me know what questions remain unanswered.